The wedding program said the gift would happen at 7:30. Not the bouquet toss, not the first dance, not the cutting of the cake. The gift. Printed in silver ink beneath my sister's name and the groom's family crest, it said, "Parents present Larkspur House to the newlyweds. Transfer paperwork to follow." 120 guests held that program in their hands. 120 people sat under white string lights on the lakefront lawn, sipping champagne beside the cedar house I had saved from foreclosure 9 years earlier. My house. The house whose property taxes came out of my checking account every February. The house whose roof I replaced after 3 estimates and one contractor tried to overcharge me because he assumed a widow would not understand Joey's damage. The house whose dock my late husband rebuilt with his own hands during the last autumn we had together. And my family was about to stand in front of everyone and give it away. My name is Elise Marlowe. I am 36 years old. I am a civil engineer. I notice load-bearing walls, cracked foundations, drainage failures, and the quiet stress points that make beautiful things collapse. That night, at my younger sister's wedding, I finally understood that my family had been a collapsing structure for years. They had simply painted over the cracks and called it tradition. Larkspur House sat on the north shore of Lake Vera, 2 hours from the city and far enough from ordinary life to make everyone sentimental. Cedar siding, green shutters, a wraparound porch, a narrow dock that reached into water so still at dawn it looked like glass. My parents used to call it our family soul. That was before the bank nearly took it. In 2017, my father's equipment rental business failed. Not slowly, not gracefully. It fell apart like a bridge after one hidden bolt gives way, and suddenly every other weakness announces itself at once. Second mortgage, credit line, late notices, legal letters. A foreclosure warning folded into my mother's recipe drawer as if hiding paper could delay math. My younger sister, Betrayal, was 24 then and still believed consequences were things that happened to people without good shoes. My parents told her not to worry. They told relatives everything was being handled. They told me the truth because I was useful. My mother, Celia, cried into the phone and said, "Elise, if we lose Larkspur, your father will never recover." My father, Roland, did not cry. He stared at the kitchen table and said the bank was being unreasonable. Banks are rarely unreasonable. They are impersonal. That is worse, but it is different. My husband Theo and I drove to Larkspur that weekend. The porch sagged in the northeast corner. Water had gotten into the support beams. The dock boards were soft. The gutters overflowed because nobody had cleaned them in 2 years. Theo stood under the porch with a flashlight between his teeth and said, "If we do this, we do it properly." He always said even when the burden had landed on my side of the family like a fallen tree. We used our savings, all of them. We took a personal loan. I negotiated directly with the bank during the short sale because my parents were too ashamed to answer phone calls. The deed was recorded in my name alone, not because I stole anything, because no lender would trust my parents with the asset, and because Theo insisted that if we were risking our future, the paperwork had to tell the truth. My mother signed the final document with her lips pressed thin. Afterward, on the porch, she said something I did not understand until years later. "You bought our memories," she said, "but don't think for 1 second that makes them yours." I should have heard the warning. Instead, I heard grief. I told myself she was embarrassed. I told myself gratitude sometimes arrived late. I told myself family love did not always know how to kneel without resenting the floor. So I paid the taxes, over $2,000 every year. I paid for a new roof. I paid Wes Calder, the local caretaker, to winterize the plumbing, clear fallen limbs, check the furnace, open the house before summer weekends, and close it again after everyone left their wet towels on antique chairs. Theo replaced the porch beams the year before he died. He came home with splinters in his hands and dust in his hair. He laughed when I scolded him for working too hard. Your family loves this place, he said. Someone should make sure it keeps standing. After the accident, I could barely drive past the lake without tasting metal in my mouth. My daughter, Hazel, was 3 when Theo died. For a while, Larkspur was more ghost than house. But I kept paying, kept preparing, kept sending checks to Wes, kept letting my parents and Brielle use it for summers, holidays, birthday weekends, engagement photos, and every sentimental occasion that required a lake and a lie. The lie grew quietly. At first, it was small. My mother called it our Larkspur. That did not bother me. Families say are about things they share. Then she called it your father's lake house at a fundraiser. Then the Marlowe family lake property. Then, when I corrected her once, she looked at me with that soft public smile and said, Elise, must you make everything so technical? Technical. That was what my family called the truth when it inconvenienced them. I did not fight every phrasing. That was my mistake. Silence is not peace. Silence is a debt that keeps accumulating somewhere you cannot see. The part nobody saw was not the purchase. The part nobody saw was the 9 years after it. Saving a house is not one heroic signature. It is 1,000 small humiliations no one applauds. It is calling the insurance company during your lunch break because the premium increased again. It is sitting at a kitchen table after your child falls asleep, choosing between paying extra on your own debt or replacing the water heater before winter. It is driving 2 hours to meet a roofer who arrives late and talks to you like you are borrowing your husband's vocabulary. It is learning which hardware store keeps cedar boards in stock. It is knowing the smell of damp insulation. It is keeping every receipt in a folder labeled Larkspur, because some exhausted part of you understands that love without documentation can be stolen by people with louder voices. Theo used to tease me about the folders. Engineer brain, he would say, kissing the top of my head. But after he died, those folders became more than organization. They became proof that I had not imagined the weight. Because grief makes people forget how much they carry, and families like mine depend on that forgetting. After Theo died, my mother performed sympathy beautifully. She brought casseroles. She arranged flowers. She told church ladies that grief had made me difficult. But of course, everyone had to be patient. I did not understand then that she was already preparing the next story. The story where I was fragile. The story where I was bitter. The story where losing my husband explained why I had become possessive over the lake house. At family dinners, people spoke around me gently, as if I were a cracked plate that might break if touched. But they still asked for keys, still asked for weekends, still used the dock, still sent me photos of themselves smiling on the porch Theo had repaired. Once, 6 months after the funeral, Brielle posted a picture from Larkspur with the caption, "Home is where the family gathers." I stared at that caption until the words blurred. Home was where my husband's fingerprints were buried under a fresh stain. Home was where my daughter still asked why Daddy's boots were not by the door. Home was where I paid invoices alone while everyone else gathered. But I said nothing. I told myself grief made me sensitive. I told myself correcting people would make me look mean. I told myself being generous would eventually be recognized. Generosity without boundaries is not virtue. It is an open gate, and some families do not walk through open gates. They move in and change the story on the mailbox. By the time Brielle became engaged to Trent Calloway, my family had repeated the story so many times that they believed it. Larkspur was theirs. I had somehow taken advantage of them in 2017. I had handled paperwork during a stressful moment. I had made myself the legal owner, which my mother described to relatives as if I had crept through a window wearing gloves. Brielle never asked me. She never asked who paid taxes, who paid insurance, who replaced the roof, who paid Wes, who approved the dock repair. She preferred the version where I was selfish because that version allowed her to want what I owned without feeling like a thief. Trent was worse. Trent saw Larkspur once and immediately calculated rental income. He wore linen shirts and used phrases like passive revenue. premium lakefront positioning, and post-wedding asset optimization. The first time he mentioned turning the house into a luxury short-term rental, I said, "Larkspur is not a revenue stream." He smiled the way men smile when they think a woman's no is just an unpriced yes. "Everything is a revenue stream if managed correctly," he said. I should have banned him from the property right then. Instead, I was tired. Widowhood teaches you to conserve energy. Single motherhood teaches you to choose which fires deserve water. When Brielle asked to hold her wedding at Larkspur, I said yes. I said yes because Hazel loved her aunt. I said yes because my father's voice softened when he talked about walking Brielle down the lawn to the dock. I said yes because a part of me was still waiting for my family to remember what I had done for them. I charged them nothing. I only asked that they respect the property rules. No structural changes, no unauthorized dock work, no overnight guests beyond the approved list, no fireworks. My mother said, "Of course, sweetheart, don't be so tense." Then the invitations went out, at the beloved Marlowe family lake house. Not Elise's house, not Larkspur House, courtesy of Elise Marlowe, the family lake house. I swallowed it, again. The week before the wedding, Wes called me. "Elise," he said, "did you approve the contractor?" "What contractor?" He went quiet. That is never good when a caretaker goes quiet. Trent had brought a dock company to inspect the shoreline. He told them ownership transfer was happening after the wedding, and he wanted estimates for modernization. He wanted rental-ready railings, lighting, boat cleats, and a digital lock system. I stood in my office, looking at bridge load diagrams on one monitor and my daughter's school photo taped to the other. For a moment, I could not breathe. I called Brielle. She laughed. "Oh, Trent is just planning ahead." "Planning ahead for what?" "Our future," she said. I said slowly, "Brielle, Larkspur is my house." The line changed, not silence, temperature. She said, "Mom was right. You always do this." "Do what?" "Hold things over us." I looked at my hands. I thought of Theo under the porch. I thought of Hazel sleeping in the small blue bedroom he painted. I thought of every tax payment, every repair, every holiday I had spent smiling while people thanked my parents for hosting. I said, "I held the house up." She hung up. The day before the wedding, Hazel and I arrived early. The lawn was already transformed. White chairs in perfect rows, florists wrapping the arbor with roses, caterers carrying trays through the kitchen as if they had always belonged there. A rental company had placed a champagne wall beside the porch steps. For a moment, I saw what guests would see. Not unpaid labor, not old debt, not Theo sweating under the porch, not me signing checks with a sleeping child against my shoulder. They would see beauty, and because beauty is persuasive, they would believe whoever claimed to own it. Hazel ran to the dock and stopped at the first board. "Mom," she called, "this is the one Daddy fixed, right?" I walked down to her. The board beneath her sandal was not actually Theo's board, but the beam under it was... I said, "Yes, your dad helped keep this place safe." She crouched and touched the wood with 2 fingers, like it was a photograph. That is what my family never understood. Larkspur was not valuable because of lakefront square footage. It was valuable because love had entered its structure. Not decorative love, not speech love, work love. The kind that stays even when no one thanks it. The wedding weekend arrived with perfect weather. Cruel weather, blue sky, soft wind, lake flashing silver between the pines. Hazel wore a pale yellow dress and carried a small cardigan because evenings by the lake turned cold. She was 7 now, old enough to understand tone, too young to understand why adults could smile while aiming knives. I told myself I would get through the ceremony. I told myself after the wedding I would clarify boundaries in writing. I told myself one more day of peace was worth it. That was before I saw the program. 7:30. Parents present Larkspur House to the newlyweds. Transfer paperwork to follow. My fingers went numb around the paper. Hazel looked up at me. Mom? I folded the program carefully. Civil engineers know collapse can begin with one overlooked stress fracture. This was not a fracture. This was someone drilling into a support column during a party. I found my mother behind the catering tent. She wore champagne silk and diamonds I had seen her claim she could never sell because some things are family. I held out the program. What is this? She barely glanced at it. A symbolic moment. No, it says transfer paperwork. She sighed. Elise, don't be difficult today. Difficult, technical, selfish. Small words families use when they need you to ignore large violations. I said, you cannot give away a house you do not own. Her eyes hardened. There it is. There what is? The ownership speech on your sister's wedding day? I laughed once, not because it was funny, because my body had run out of polite sounds. She leaned close and said, you bought our memories, Elise. That never meant you owned the family. I said, I never tried to own the family. No, she said, you just made sure we could never forget what we owed you. That was the truth. Not legal truth, emotional truth. My mother did not hate me because I had taken Larkspur. She hated me because I had saved it. Gratitude felt like debt to her, and she would rather call me greedy than admit she had needed me. I walked away before I said something Hazel would remember forever. The ceremony was beautiful. That almost made it worse. White chairs facing the lake. Brielle glowing in lace. My father crying as he walked her down the aisle. Trent smiling like a man accepting delivery. Hazel squeezed my hand. Aunt Brielle looks pretty, she whispered. She does, I said. Pain is complicated. Someone can be cruel and still look beautiful in the golden hour. Dinner began under a sailcloth tent. Wine flowed. Music drifted. Guests praised the lake house. My parents received compliments like rightful hosts. Before the speeches, I almost left. I took Hazel to the side of the tent and told her we might go back to the cottage early. She looked relieved. That should have been enough. But then I looked at the program again. 7:30, the gift. Transfer paperwork to follow. If I left, they would still say it. They would stand under my lights, on my lawn, beside my husband's porch, and tell a room full of people that Larkspur belonged to them. Then later, when I refused to sign anything, I would become the woman who ruined a promise already made. The selfish widow who embarrassed everyone after the fact. The technical sister who hid behind paperwork. I had seen this engineering problem before. A failure path forms before the collapse. If you do not interrupt the load while it is being transferred, the structure will fail exactly where the liars designed it to fail. So I stayed, not because I wanted drama, because sometimes leaving a lie uninterrupted is how it becomes evidence against you. Then came the speeches. Brielle took the microphone first. She thanked our parents for giving her a childhood full of beauty. She thanked Trent for seeing possibility in old things. Then she looked at me. My stomach tightened. And my sister Elise, she said, smiling brightly, taught me exactly what kind of woman I never wanted to become. A ripple of laughter moved through the tent, uncertain at first, then stronger when my mother laughed. Brielle continued, she taught me that bitterness can make you lonely, that control is not love, and that being technically right is not the same as being wanted. Hazel's hand went still in mine. I felt the entire tent blur at the edges. Then my mother took the microphone. I should have stood up then, but some part of me still believed a mother would not do the final damage in front of her granddaughter. I was wrong. Celia smiled at the guests and said, every family has one child who shines and one who teaches everyone patience. More laughter. My father covered his mouth. not to object, to hide his laugh. Then my mother looked directly at me and said, "But even used things can still be useful, right, Elise?" Used things. In front of my daughter? Something inside me went very quiet. Not numb, aligned. I looked at Hazel. Her eyes were wet. She whispered, "Why did Grandma say that?" And that was the moment I stopped being the daughter hoping for fairness and became the mother responsible for truth. I stood. The tent did not go silent immediately. People expected a toast, an emotional sisterly reply, maybe a trembling apology. I walked to the microphone. Brielle's smile tightened. My mother's eyes warned me to behave. My father looked down at his plate. When I spoke into the microphone, I could feel my old self fighting to survive. The daughter who apologized for tone, the widow who feared being called bitter, the older sister who had always been expected to step aside because Brielle cried prettier. That version of me whispered, "Stop, let them have the night. Fix it privately. Do not embarrass them." Then I looked at Hazel. Her chin was trembling, but she was watching me with complete attention. Children do not only remember what hurts them, they remember what adults do after the hurt. I realized she was standing at a doorway I had stood at my entire life. On one side was the comfortable lie. On the other side was the costly truth. I could not choose the lie and then tell her to be brave later. So I tightened my hand around the microphone and let the daughter in me step back. The mother stepped forward. I took the microphone and said, "I need to make a structural correction." A few people chuckled. They thought it was a joke because engineers are allowed one personality trait at family events. I said, "Larkspur House is not my parents' property to give away." The laughter died badly. I continued. "The deed has been in my name since 2017, when I purchased the house from the bank to prevent foreclosure after my parents' financial crisis." My mother stood. "Elise, stop." I did not look at her. I have paid the property taxes for 9 years. I replaced the roof. I repaired the dock. I paid for winterization, maintenance, insurance, and local caretaking. Trent pulled out his phone. That told me everything about him. Not concern, not shame, verification. I said, "My late husband, Theo, rebuilt the porch beams with his own hands so this house would pass inspection. His labor is under the floorboards you all walked across tonight." My voice broke on his name. I let it. Some truths deserve to arrive with a wound still visible. My father finally stood. "This is not the time." I looked at him. "You allowed them to put the time in the program." Silence. Wes Calder stepped out from near the catering staff. He was not dressed for the wedding. He wore his cleanest work shirt and held his cap in both hands. He said, "She's telling the truth." Every head turned. Wes swallowed. "I have maintained this property for 9 years. Every check came from Elise Marlowe. Every repair approval came from Elise. Mr. and Mrs. Marlowe never paid me $1 for Larkspur." My mother looked betrayed. That almost made me laugh. People who build lies always feel betrayed by witnesses. Then Trent said, too loudly, "The public record does show Elise as sole owner." Brielle turned on him. "You checked?" He stared at the phone. "I mean, it's right there." Right there. 9 years of truth. Right there. Waiting for anyone who cared enough to look. I turned back to the guests. "There will be no transfer paperwork tonight. There will be no transfer paperwork tomorrow. Larkspur is not a wedding gift. It is not a rental project. It is not a family myth available for public pressure." My mother's face collapsed into fury. "You are humiliating your sister." I said, "No, I am correcting a public falsehood in the same room where it was presented." Brielle started crying. For 1 second, guilt moved through me automatically. That old reflex. Older sisters are trained to absorb the weather. Then Hazel slipped her hand into mine. The guilt stopped. My daughter had heard them call me unwanted, used, bitter. She had watched adults laugh. If I stayed silent, she would learn that dignity was something women surrendered to keep parties pretty. I would not teach her that. The wedding did not recover. Music restarted too softly. Guests whispered. Trent's parents left early. Brielle refused to speak to me. My mother told anyone who would listen that I had ruined the happiest day of my sister's life because I could not stand not being the center of attention. I drove Hazel back to the small rental cottage we had taken for the weekend. She was quiet for 10 minutes. Then she asked, "Is Larkspur really ours?" I said, "It is mine legally, but it is part of your father too." She looked out the window. "Then Grandma should not give it away." Children understand ownership better than adults when adults are lying. The weeks after the wedding were uglier than the wedding itself. Public humiliation is loud. Aftermath is procedural. My mother called relatives before I could. Brielle cried to cousins. Trent told his friends I had sabotaged a family wealth transfer. People who had eaten food under my tent and danced beside my lake sent careful messages that began with, "I don't want to get involved," and then immediately got involved. One aunt wrote, "Couldn't you have waited until after the wedding?" I wrote back, "They scheduled the transfer during the wedding." She did not reply. That is the thing about clarity. Some people only request it until it arrives. I sent a packet to every close relative who had heard the lie. Deed copy, tax records, insurance records, repair invoices, caretaker payments, photos of Theo working under the porch. No insults, no emotional essay, just facts. It was the most engineered thing I had ever done. It was also the most freeing. The next morning, my father came to the cottage. He looked smaller without the wedding suit, older, ashamed. He said, "I'm sorry I covered my mouth." I stood on the porch with my coffee cooling in my hand. "That's what you're sorry for?" His eyes filled. "I'm sorry we let the story exist." That sentence mattered more. He said, "It was easier to believe your mother's version than to admit you saved us." I waited. Engineers trust support only after testing load. He said, "Theo saved us too." That was when I cried. Not for the apology. For Theo, for the years his work had been hidden under other people's pride. My father asked if we could rebuild. I told him maybe, not soon, not without therapy, not without telling Hazel the truth, not without correcting the lie with every relative who had heard it. My mother did not apologize. She sent a message 3 days later. "You chose paperwork over family." I wrote back, "No, I chose truth over performance." Then I changed the locks. I removed my parents and Brielle from the access list. I sent written rules through an attorney. No use without permission. No contractors. No events. No statements implying ownership. It felt cold. It was not. It was maintenance. A boundary is not a wall built out of cruelty. It is a load-bearing beam installed where people keep leaning too hard. Trent and Brielle did not get Larkspur. They also did not get the lakefront rental empire he had imagined. He eventually posted something online about toxic relatives weaponizing technicalities. I did not respond. Public records had already responded. The first weekend after I changed the locks, my mother drove to Larkspur anyway. Wes called me from the gravel drive. "She's here," he said. In the background, I could hear my mother's voice. Sharp, offended, performing injury for the pine trees. She says she has a right to enter. I closed my eyes. For 9 years, I had confused kindness with unlimited access. I had thought a locked door meant cruelty. But a house without locks is not generous. It is unsafe. I told Wes, "Ask her to leave. If she refuses, call the sheriff's non-emergency line. My voice did not shake. That surprised me. Later that day, my mother sent one sentence. "So this is who you are now." I looked at Hazel doing homework at the table. I looked at Theo's old mug on the shelf. I looked at the folder marked Larkspur. Then I answered, yes. That autumn, Hazel and I went to Larkspur alone. The lake was cold. The porch held firm. The beams Theo replaced were hidden, but I knew exactly where they were. I made hot chocolate. Hazel drew at the kitchen table. For the first time in years, the house felt quiet in a way that did not hurt. I walked down to the dock at sunset. The boards creaked softly beneath my feet. I thought about all the years I had mistaken access for love. I had let them use the house because I wanted them to remember the rescue. They remembered the house, not the rescue. That was the lesson. Some people will accept your sacrifice as long as they can rename it entitlement. Some people will live inside what you saved and still call you selfish for holding the deed. But legal truth has a power, emotionalized fear. It does not need applause. It does not need approval. It can sit quietly in a county office for 9 years and still arrive exactly when needed. I am still low contact with my mother and Brielle. That is not revenge. It is calculation. Simple, clean calculation. Every relationship has loads. Trust, respect, memory, care. When one side keeps adding weight and removing support, eventually the ethical choice is not to stand there until everything falls on your child. The ethical choice is to step away. Larkspur still stands, not because my family loved it loudly, because Theo and I loved it with receipts, repairs, tax payments, and sweat. My mother called me used. My sister called me unwanted. My father laughed until the truth asked him to look at himself. And at 7:30, when they were supposed to give away my house in front of 120 guests, I walked to the microphone and corrected the structure. The house did not collapse that night. The lie did.